From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. Hey, James, I'm glad to be back with you, and we have a special guest with us today.
It's great to be back here with Steve, and look forward to having this discussion with one of the AV SuperFriends, Larry. Larry and I had met online, got connected through higher ed. I've listened to AV SuperFriends. Probably listened to all of them, both the on topic and off the rails. And just met him a couple times at InfoComm, correct, Larry?
Yeah, I think we've met each other at a couple of the Infocoms in person now, and I'm a big fan of the podcast as well. And so I'm just thrilled to be here to talk about programming because it's kind of what I like to think of myself as.
So just to set the context, Larry Darling from University of North Carolina at Greensboro, and a member of the AV SuperFriends, which is a podcast I recently got turned on to as well. So James, you and Larry know each other through the higher ed circles.
Correct.
So well, I thought maybe today would be good for us just to take a moment, since we all not only do this podcast, but also have done other ones. And we could just take a page out of the AV SuperFriends book and go a little off the rails and talk about what got us into podcasting. Why is it something that we find important to do for ourselves and for the industry? And Larry, if you want to kick us off with that.
Sure. I've been a fan of podcasting in general since it started to come out. And I think what drew me to the medium was it was an easy way for me to supplement my knowledge based on particular interests. Like if I wanted to know something about pedagogy in the classroom, there's podcasts for that. You know, it's a very low entry bar for people to build community and start to get their message out. And so that really drew me in as a customer. And then after I started working in higher ed, and I found that there was a need to build that higher ed community, because the way we approach AV is different than commercial. And a lot of the time the manufacturers trainings and the, Avixa corporate groups are just different than what we do on a typical basis. And so that's where the AV SuperFriends came from. It was a way to kind of fill that need, build the community, and steal ideas from each other.
That's such a great tie-in too, because James, you and I really got together through Twitter for the most part, and then we also connected on a state of control, and then got the idea of doing this podcast to also build community and to try to get the word out about what we do. And I know that you're also on the AV Life, and so podcasting is a big part of your professional career too. Why don't you fill in anything more that you want to add there?
I think Larry said pretty good, but about building the community and filling a need. Like that's why, like Steve, you and I started this, there was a need to build a community for programmers. And I only got started on podcasts probably when I actually started my MBA career 3 years ago. In fact, it was funny. Yeah, it was about 3 years ago when I started listening to podcasts because it was right around the birth of my son. I had a classmate who suggested listen to podcasts. I'm like, okay. But I find that it's a good way to get the voice out of, because there's a lot we have to say, a lot we have to share. And there's many knowledgeable folks in our industry, but a lot of times they're silent because of one reason or another. And I think podcast is a way to get voices out.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with that notion. I mean, I'm involved on the Slack channel that James King runs as well. And I've noticed, because I run the AV SuperFriends social media feed, you have different groups of people throughout the social media, the Slack channel, the podcast. And so there's not one way to communicate with the entire community. And so the more avenues we give people to become integrated into it, the better.
What's nice too, I think, is that you get to know people through podcasts, and it's like an intimate medium, and there's a bit of a genuineness about it because of how informal it is. It's not like you're being read a textbook or you're being presented a lecture. You're just hearing people talk, and you're almost like a fly on the wall. So it's kind of neat in that regard. And to me, some of the rawness of it makes it even more valuable.
I would completely agree. I mean, James brought up his MBA program. I'm in a grad program right now as well. And I find myself going out and searching for podcasts that cover the subject material. A, because it's a different perspective, but B, because typically it's not going to be that academic speak. It's going to be people's experiences, just real world. This is what actually happens. And it's good to hear that narrative a lot.
I agree. I think what Larry kind of mentioned there, it's not your textbook. If you go into a classroom, you know, here's how policy is dictated. This is what you should be doing. But then we all know in the real world, it doesn't always go that way. And where podcasts kind of gives you, I want to say that wise old man, and when you're shadowing them on the first day of the job and saying, yeah, the book may say you do it this way, but really we're doing it this way. That's what you get from podcasts.
So it's kind of like an entry point into the like real world, if you will, experience, or the application of what you're learning.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that apprenticeship, just like James was saying, that we've really lost in the industry. When I came up in the industry, I was assigned to the hip to a guy who'd been there for 10 years. And you don't do that as much when you're bringing in somebody new because we're so busy. We're using subcontractors and everything else. You don't get that. So these type of mediums really help to fill in the void of some of that institutional knowledge kind of thing.
Couldn't agree more. And I tell people a lot of times that how I learn business, because I'm an engineer by education, is through Podcast University.
Yeah.
I just started listening and then hearing people on podcasts, and then maybe starting to follow them. But but I don't listen to books on tape. I find that to be something like, is not what works for me, because my mind wanders. But I kind of listen to podcasts almost like I listen to sports radio. It's like I can keep it in the background and pick up on things that I want to hear, or if I'm, certainly driving or exercising, I is like my sweet spot.
Same here. I mean, I couldn't really listen to podcasts when I'm working out or anything, but when I was driving, like commute to and from work all the time, unfortunately, I don't get to do that much now. So actually what I do now is during my lunch break, I'll listen to the podcasts so I can catch up on them. But I agree. There's so many great ones out there. The Podcast University, I think it's a great one. We all know about the YouTube University. My problem with YouTube is I'm a type of person, if I throw YouTube on, I got to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
For a podcast, like you said, you could be doing other things while it's going on in the background and you're picking up. I tried doing that with YouTube. It's like a squirrel moment. Oop, I got to watch it.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way now, where in my current role, I'm at my desk a whole lot more than I've ever been in any previous role. And so I take my lunch breaks and I throw on podcasts and I go for a walk around campus, A, to get away from the desk and to clear my mind, but B, to kind of get that time to focus on some podcasts for the enrichment of either the management side or the AV side, whatever side I feel like I need to focus on at that time. I have a couple that I look at.
Yeah, I think I have my playlist, you can almost say, of different ones, and they're not all AV. I'll admit, majority of mine are AV, but I also have a soccer coaching one, which also not only talks about coaching, but it talks about leadership in life. And I also do a one that's called Coaching for Leaders. I find that one to be very good. I'm really enjoying
That's
this.
one of my favorites as well. I've been listening to them for 5 years now, I think.
Wow.
Hmm.
Yeah, I just finished his lesson on what was it? Shoot. I just delegation. That's it.
Yeah,
And
and I like theirs because they interview a lot of other people in the leadership realm, and I've gotten lots. I'm an audiobook junkie too, so I've gotten lots of audiobook recommendations just from their interviews.
and I think this is what actually makes podcasting so cool is that you trade. You
Mhm.
know, what do you listen to? What do I listen to? And hey, let me check that out. And you know, unfortunately there are only certain places where you can probably find you know a hub to do searching on topics. So you almost have to get some personal recommendations. It's that much of a tight knit community in that regard. Um, what for while since we're talking to programmers and we're really trying to promote that, are there any podcasts that you guys would recommend that are good for this audience, you know, or you know some tips for them to be able to look for something that's going to be of value, because sometimes it's not just the subject matter that you're most focused on, but more so ways to learn things that will balance your skill set or give you some other avenues for development.
Yeah, I'll jump in and let Larry clean it up. But I want to mention what you mentioned there is a balance. Like I said, I've listened to a soccer coaching one. I listened to this coaching for leaders. I find myself in management now, but I wasn't when I started listening to these. And they're very valuable. There's things I've learned that actually expand my horizon, not only as a programmer, but as a human being. And I think if we just, focus just on programming, or even if you're an installer and you just focus on those kind of subject, you kind of get tunnel vision. So I definitely think if you can broaden your horizon on different aspects, so you can take parts and actually grow your knowledge.
Yeah, exactly what James said. Like I try not to focus on just things I'm comfortable with. And so I listen to a lot of the traditional AV one, like Ask the Programmer Out, obviously, the AV Life, Higher Ed AV. I do those. But outside of those, the one I really recommend is one called The Code of Pedagogy. And it's from the teacher perspective and the instructional designer perspective, but it helps give you an idea of what their goals are, how they see the classroom experience. And so that helps me when I'm designing, that helps me when I'm coaching the programmers on, okay, this is what they're trying to achieve. How can we make that better?
That's a really good point. So it's also thinking about learning from the area of expertise of your audience as well as your peers. And so that's really great. Before we wrap up, Larry, why don't you give us a little bit of insight about AV SuperFriends so that we can give you the opportunity to pitch that to this audience and get some more people listening to your show.
Sure, great. So I'm part of the AV Super Friends. We do 3 podcasts a month. Two of them are off the rails. One of them is called On Topic, and that's primarily published through the Higher Ed AV magazine. But after it's published there, we put it back on our website too. And we just launched our 3rd year. And in this 3rd year, one of our goals is to start doing live events as well. And so if you follow us on LinkedIn or Twitter, you'll get notifications whenever we're going to do a Friday afternoon live event, just to get everybody together and try to build that community a little bit more.
And how can people find out more about it and get in touch with you as well?
We're on LinkedIn and Twitter, and if you just search for AV SuperFriends, we have a presence on both, and I'm on them as well. So if you just search for Larry Darling on LinkedIn or Twitter and send me a message, I'll reach out.
Excellent. And just as a little plug there, it's very candid conversations. So like for somebody like me who is a third party and, my company programs in many different verticals, it's just great to hear what other people are going through and hear how we're perceived through the eyes of our audience per se, and get I'll just understand what are some of the struggles and what are some of the frustrations, because honestly, that's what service providers are meant to do, is address those. So it actually, if you think about it, you're sharing what you want from people, and it's a great way to not have to guess. You just know how you can serve your audience. But thank you for being on today, and thank you for sharing. And we'll definitely have you on again, James. How can people get in touch with you, and also if you have anything that you wanted to share as well?
Again, I just want to thank Larry for joining us. Again, you guys can always find me on Twitter, AV_James King. Anywhere there's HEPMA, I do write for the Higher Ed Digital Magazine, the IT and AV column. I am a crew member on the AV Life. Again, Google me, you'll find me.
Absolutely. And when in doubt, check out Twitter and look for AV_James King. So, for me, you can reach me on social media at Steve Greenblatt. I do some writing for AV Network, Commercial Integrator. Also host State of Control on avnation.tv. And also my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. But it's been great to have Larry and also be able to talk about something that's a little bit different and share the value of podcasts. I accredit a lot of my ability to think on my toes and the improvement that feel that I've made doing speaking from being involved in podcasts. So we're always looking for guests. Please reach out to us and not only ask questions and provide feedback, but let us know if you want to be part of the show, and we'll be glad to have you on here. As you know, you can find Ask the Programmer on Apple and Google Podcasts, as well as YouTube. And that's what we have for today. And this has been Ask the Programmer.